I thought it was a routine holiday check-in until my sister delivered the blow. She told me to skip Christmas because my life was a mess, and she did not want her new boyfriend to see me like that. I agreed to stay away, but the very next morning, a name appeared on my schedule. When the conference room doors opened, the man she was trying to impress walked right into my office. My name is Autumn Schwartz, and at 35 years old, I had learned that the loudest power in a room is often the one that speaks the least. I was currently sitting at the head of a long, tempered glass conference table on the 42nd floor, looking out over the gray, steel-ribbed skyline of Chicago. The air in the room was recycled and cold, smelling faintly of dry erase markers and ambition. We were in the middle of a critical strategic review for the upcoming fiscal year. On the screen behind me, a projection displayed our projected growth at 18% for the first quarter alone. The neural link prototype is tracking ahead of schedule. Marcus, my lead engineer, was saying. He tapped his stylus against his tablet. However, we need to authorize the second round of funding by Friday if we want to secure the patent rights in the European market. That is a transfer of $2 million. I nodded, keeping my face impassive. $2 million, a number that would have made my father choke on his morning coffee. But here, in this sanctuary of glass and steel, it was just another logistical hurdle. Do it, I said, my voice steady. But I want the legal team to triple-check the liability clauses. We are not leaving anything open to interpretation. Marcus nodded, pleased. The room was tense, the kind of good tension that comes before a massive breakthrough. I was in my element. I was in control. And then, the phone in the pocket of my blazer buzzed. It was a sharp, aggressive vibration against my ribs. I ignored it. I had a strict policy about personal devices during high-level strategy meetings, but then it buzzed again, and again, a relentless, frantic rhythm that demanded attention. I frowned slightly. Only 3 people had this number, and 2 of them were sitting in this room. That left one person. Lena. My younger sister? I held up a hand, silencing the room. The sudden quiet was heavy. Excuse me for one moment, I said. I did not offer an explanation. I did not apologize. I simply stood up, my chair sliding back silently on the plush carpet, and walked out of the conference room. As soon as the heavy glass door clicked shut behind me, sealing the sound of the office away, I pulled the phone out. The screen was lighting up with her name. I slid my thumb across to answer. This better be an emergency, Lena, I said. I did not raise my voice, but the temperature in the corridor seemed to drop. I am in the middle of a meeting. Don't come, Lena said. There was no greeting, no preamble. Her voice was high, tight, and rushing, like water forced through a narrow pipe. I paused, staring at the abstract painting hanging on the opposite wall. It was a chaotic swirl of reds and blacks. Excuse me? Christmas, Lena said. She sounded breathless, as if she had been running, or perhaps pacing. Don't come to Christmas this year. Autumn, I know you booked your flight, and I know you sent the gifts already, but you cannot come. I will pay you back for the ticket. Just tell me how much. 500? 600? I stood very still. My hand tightened around the phone. You are uninviting me to Christmas? 3 days before the holiday? It is not like that, she said, though it was exactly like that. It is just, look, things are different this year. Remember I told you about Julian? The new boyfriend, I said. The one you have been dating for 2 months. 3 months, she corrected sharply. And it is serious. Autumn, like, really serious. He is different. His family is prominent, like, on the board of the symphony prominent. He is coming to dinner this year. He wants to meet the family. I waited. I let the silence stretch out between us, heavy and suffocating. And I need everything to be perfect, Lena said. Her voice dropped, losing some of its frantic edge and replacing it with something colder, something that sounded like pity but felt like a blade. I need us to look cohesive, normal. I am your sister, I said. I am family. How is my presence abnormal? There was a pause on the other end. I could hear rustling, And then a familiar voice in the background. My mother. She was whispering something indistinguishable. "Mom and Dad are there?" I asked. "Yes," Lena said. "We are on speaker." So they were all in on it. They were all sitting in the warm, yellow-lit kitchen of my childhood home, deciding how to excise me from the picture like a tumor. "Hi, honey." My mother's voice floated through the speaker. She sounded nervous, her tone coated in that sugary, placating layer she always used when she was allowing Lena to get her way. "Listen to your sister, okay? It is a big night for her. We just want everything to go smoothly." "And me being there would make it rough?" I asked. "It is not about you," Lena snapped, regaining control of the conversation. "God, why do you always make it about you? It is about the vibe. Julian is very traditional. He comes from a world where women are softer, where families are close-knit and uncomplicated. And let's be honest, Autumn," she let out a short, harsh laugh, "your life is a mess." The words landed with physical force. I blinked. Looking at my reflection in the window of the corridor, I saw a woman in a tailored Italian suit, hair pulled back in a severe, immaculate bun. I saw a woman who had just authorized a $2 million transfer without blinking. I saw a woman who ran a company that was changing the way the human nervous system interacted with technology. "My life is a mess," I repeated, my voice flat. "You are single," Lena listed, counting off my sins. "You live in that cold apartment in the city. You bounce between jobs you never talk about. You are unstable. Autumn. You have this intense, broken energy. I don't want Julian to see that. I don't want him to think I come from that." I felt a coldness spread through my chest, starting from my heart and radiating out to my fingertips. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot. This was ice. It was the realization of a profound and fundamental disconnect. I had spent the last 10 years protecting them. I had kept the magnitude of my work secret because I didn't want to overwhelm them, because I didn't want the dynamic to shift, because I wanted to be loved for being their daughter and sister, not for being the CEO of a tech giant. I had sent money home, thousands of dollars over the years, disguised as bonuses or lucky breaks so they wouldn't feel indebted to me. And this was my return on investment. "Unstable," I said. "Broken energy." "Please, Autumn," my father spoke up now. His voice was gruff, weary. "Just do this for your sister. Don't cause a scene. We will do a late Christmas with you in January. Just us." They were negotiating with me. They were managing me. I closed my eyes for a second, inhaling the sterile air of the office. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "What?" Lena asked. "Julian," I said, "if my reality is so shameful that I cannot even sit at the dinner table, you must have told him something to explain why I exist. Or did you tell him you were an only child?" I didn't say that," Lena stammered. The shift in her tone was subtle, but I caught it. It was the frequency of a lie. I kept it vague. I told him you were figuring things out, that you were going through a hard time." "A hard time," I echoed. "He thinks you are, recovering," she muttered. "Recovering from what?" "Does it matter?" she shouted, her patience snapping. "Just don't come, Autumn, okay? Just stay in the city with your whatever it is you do. Let me have this one thing. Let me have a normal Christmas with a guy who actually has a future." The irony was so sharp it almost cut the inside of my mouth. A guy with a future. I looked back at the conference room door, through the glass. I could see my team waiting. They were the best minds in the industry. They looked at me with respect. They looked at me and saw a leader. My family looked at me and saw a liability. I could have fought. I could have told them right then and there that I paid off the mortgage on their house 3 years ago through a shell corporation. I could have told Lena that the administrative job she thought I had was actually owning the building she was hoping to get married in one day. But I didn't. Because if they could not see me, if they refused to see me, then no amount of evidence would change their minds. They had written a story about me, a tragedy where I was the black sheep, the failure, the mess, and they loved that story more than they loved me. It made them feel superior. It made Lena feel successful by comparison. "Fine," I said. The silence on the other end was stunned. They had expected a fight. They had prepared for an argument. "Fine?" Lena asked, suspicious. "You are right," I said. My voice was devoid of emotion. It was the voice I used when I fired someone who had breached a non-disclosure agreement. Professional, detached, final. "I would hate to ruin your image. I won't come." "Oh," Lena said. She sounded relieved, but also slightly unsettled by how easy it was. "Okay, good. That is, thank you. Autumn, really, you will see. It is for the best." "I am sure it is," I said. "We will call you on Christmas Day," my mother added quickly. "We love you, honey." "Goodbye," I said. I ended the call before they could say anything else. I stood there for another 10 seconds, staring at the black screen of my phone. I felt a strange sensation in my chest, a lightening. The tether had been cut. I had held onto it for years, letting it drag me behind them, but they had just severed it. I was free. I turned around and walked back into the conference room. The conversation stopped as I entered. Marcus looked up, concern knitting his brow. "Everything all right, Ms. Schwartz?" he asked. I walked to the head of the table and sat down. I placed my phone face down on the polished glass surface. I looked at the team, my eyes clear, my focus absolute. "Everything is resolved," I said. "Now, about the European patent. I want to accelerate the timeline. Let's move the filing date up by 2 weeks. I was done being the daughter who tried too hard. I was done being the sister who made herself small. If they wanted me to be a stranger, I would be a stranger. But the universe, I would soon learn, has a very twisted sense of humor. Because while I had agreed to stay out of Lena's world, Lena had no idea that her world was about to walk into mine. I finished the meeting at 6 o'clock. I went back to my office, the corner suite with the panoramic view. I sat there in the dark for a long time, watching the city lights flicker on below me like a carpet of diamonds. I was alone, but for the first time in 35 years, I did not feel lonely. I felt ready. I just didn't know that the test would come the very next morning. The silence in my office was not empty. It was filled with the hum of the server room down the hall, a sound that most people would find irritating, but that to me sounded like a heartbeat. It was the rhythm of the life I had built, a life that my family knew absolutely nothing about. To understand why I accepted my sister's rejection with such terrifying calm, you have to understand the architecture of my childhood. In every family, roles are assigned early, often before the children are even old enough to speak. Lena was the protagonist. I was the narrator. Lena was the sun, burning bright and demanding that every planet in her orbit rotate specifically to catch her light. I was the shadow that provided the necessary contrast to make her shine. It was not that my parents were cruel. They were simply audience members who preferred a certain genre of entertainment. Lena was loud, colorful, and easily understood. She won dance competitions. She was voted prom queen. Her achievements came with sashes, plastic trophies, and applause that you could hear from the parking lot. My victories were silent. I won math Olympiads. I coded my first website when I was 12. I read medical journals for fun. These were not things that could be displayed on the mantelpiece in the living room. They were abstract. And in the Schwartz household, if you could not hold it in your hand or take a picture of it, it did not count. I learned to be quiet. I learned that my discipline made them uncomfortable. When I woke up at 5 in the morning to study, my mother would tell me to relax, to stop being so intense. They mistook my focus for unhappiness. They mistook my ambition for anxiety. By the time I entered the medical field, the gap between us was already a canyon. I started as a clinical researcher, working in the emergency rooms of high-volume trauma centers. I wanted to save lives. But what I found was that medicine was not failing because of a lack of skilled doctors. It was failing because of broken information. I watched a 17-year-old boy die on a stretcher because his allergy data was trapped in a server that could not talk to the emergency room system. I watched nurses spend 40% of their shifts filling out redundant paperwork while patients waited in pain. I saw the inefficiency, the waste, the tragic loss of human potential due to bad data architecture. It broke me, and then it remade me. I left the clinical side. My parents thought I had quit because I could not handle the pressure. They told the neighbors that Autumn had burned out and was looking for something easier. I did not correct them. I did not tell them that I had locked myself in a basement apartment with 2 other engineers, subsisting on instant coffee and adrenaline, building the backbone of what would become the most efficient interoperability platform in modern healthcare. We called it The Bridge. It was not an app that you downloaded on your phone to track your calories. It was the invisible piping that connected 300 major hospital systems across the country. If you went to a hospital in Seattle, your doctor could see your records from Miami in less than 2 seconds because of code that I wrote at 3 in the morning. We went public 4 years ago. The valuation was staggering. But unlike the founders who bought islands and gave interviews to tech magazines, I stayed in the dark. I scrubbed my name from the public-facing press releases. I remained the Chief Operations Officer, a title that sounded boring enough to be ignored. When I visited my parents, they would ask me how work was. I would tell them I was doing administrative support for healthcare systems. It was technically true. I supported the system. I just happened to own the support structure. "That is nice, dear," my mother would say, patting my hand. "It is good to have a steady paycheck. Maybe one day you will meet a doctor." I created a test, a cruel, quiet test. I wanted to know if they loved me. Not the CEO me, not the woman whose net worth was discussed in whispered tones in boardrooms. I wanted to know if they loved Autumn, the daughter who was quiet and intense and supposedly a mess. So I curated the image of the failure they expected. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in a modest part of the city. It was clean, but small. I drove a 5-year-old sedan with a dent in the rear bumper. I wore clothes that were practical and unbranded. When we went out to dinner, I let my father pay, watching him puff up his chest with the pride of the provider, slipping him the validation he craved. But while I played the role of the struggling daughter, I was secretly holding up the sky for them. 2 years ago, my father needed a triple bypass surgery. His insurance denied the claim because of a clerical error regarding a pre-existing condition. He was frantic. He sat at the kitchen table, gray-faced, looking at a bill for $80,000. I went into the other room and made a call. I routed the money through a charitable grant foundation that my company funded. The next day, the hospital called my father to tell him there had been a billing adjustment, and the surgery was covered in full. He cried. He thanked God. He thanked the hospital administrators. He never thanked me. I sat there drinking tap water, listening to him praise the universe for its kindness, knowing that the kindness had come from the bank account of the daughter he thought was a failure. When Lena totaled her car last year, I arranged for her insurance payout to be 3 times the value of the vehicle. She thought she was a brilliant negotiator. She bragged about it for months. I paid off my mother's credit card debt. I covered the cost of the new roof for their house, disguising it as a class action lawsuit settlement from the shingle manufacturer. I had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars keeping them afloat, keeping them comfortable, keeping them safe. I did it because I wanted to believe that family was about taking care of each other, even if they did not know it. I did it because I was waiting for the day when they would look past the surface and see me. I wanted them to ask, "Are you happy, Autumn?" instead of, "Are you married yet?" I wanted them to say, "We are proud of how hard you work," instead of, "Why can't you be more fun like Lena?" But the phone call I had just received was the final set of data I needed to complete my analysis. The experiment was over. The results were conclusive. They did not want me. They wanted a prop, and since I was a prop that apparently looked too damaged to fit into their Christmas tableau, I was being discarded. I stood up from my desk and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. The glass was cool against my forehead. For 35 years, I had been trying to buy their love with obedience and anonymity. I had dimmed my light so Lena would not feel blinded. I had made myself small so my father would feel big. I had hidden my genius so my mother would not feel alienated. I had thought that if I stripped away the money and the power, I would find the pure, unconditional love underneath. I was wrong. There was nothing underneath. Without the illusion of success, they treated me with pity, and the moment my perceived failure threatened to embarrass them in front of a stranger, they cut me off. Administrative support, I whispered to my reflection. My reflection stared back. It did not look like a woman who needed saving. It looked like a predator that had finally woken up. I walked back to my desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a leather-bound portfolio. I did not open it often. It contained the deeds, the trusts, the patent filings, and the true organizational charts of my company. It also contained a file marked Personal Beneficiaries. I opened the file. Inside were the standing orders for the automatic transfers I made to my parents' accounts every month, disguised as dividends from a small stock portfolio I had supposedly set up for them years ago. There was the recurring payment for Lena's student loans. There was the fund for the family vacation they were planning in August. I picked up my fountain pen. The ink was black, permanent. I drew a single, straight line through the first authorization, then the second, then the third. I did not feel angry. Anger is a hot, messy emotion, the kind Lena would display. I felt cold. I felt precise. I was a surgeon cutting out necrotic tissue to save the rest of the body. I picked up my office phone and dialed my personal banker. It was 7 in the evening, but for the tier of client I was, he answered on the first ring. "Ms. Schwartz," he said. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need to make some immediate changes to my external transfers," I said. "Every standing order to the accounts ending in 456 and 889 is to be terminated effective immediately. No grace period, no final notification." "Understood," he said. He did not ask why. That was why I paid him. "Anything else?" "Yes," I said. "I have a meeting tomorrow morning with a representative from St. Jude's Medical Group. The lead negotiator is a man named Julian. I need a full dossier on him and his current standing with the hospital board by 6 in the morning." "Consider it done." I hung up. The office was quiet again, but it was no longer the silence of a victim. It was the silence of a chess player who has just seen the winning move, 5 turns before her opponent even realizes the game has begun. I looked at the calendar on my wall. December 23rd. Lena wanted a perfect Christmas. She wanted a Christmas without the mess of her sister's life. I would give her exactly what she asked for. I would remove myself completely. And along with me, I would remove the invisible safety net that had been catching them every time they fell for the last decade. They wanted to impress Julian with their stability. They had no idea that their stability was entirely subsidized by the woman they had just uninvited. I turned off the lights in my office. As I walked to the elevator, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. Tomorrow, Julian would walk through those doors. He would be expecting a generic administrator. He would be expecting a woman broken by life. He was about to meet the woman who owned the building. The next morning arrived with the gray, steel-edged precision of a guillotine blade. I was at my desk by 6:30, an hour before the cleaning crews usually finished the executive floor. The city below was still waking up, a grid of yellow taxicabs and steam rising from the vents. But inside my office, the air was already vibrating with kinetic energy. My assistant, Elena, walked in at exactly 7 o'clock. She was 24, sharp as a tack, and terrified of disappointing me. She carried a tablet in one hand and a double espresso in the other. She placed the coffee on my desk with the care one might use when handling a live grenade. "Good morning, Ms. Schwartz," she said. "The schedule for the day has been updated. The delegation from St. Jude's Medical Group pushed their arrival time up by 30 minutes. They will be here at 9 o'clock sharp." I nodded, not looking up from the quarterly reports I was reviewing. "Who is leading the delegation?" "The Vice President of External Procurement," Elena said, tapping her screen. "A Mr. Julian Thorpe." My pen stopped moving. The ink bled slightly into the paper, forming a tiny, dark pool. Julian. I looked up. "Thorpe?" "Yes, ma'am. Julian Thorpe. He is new to the board. Apparently, he is looking to make a splash by restructuring their tech partnerships before the fiscal year ends. I reached out and took the tablet from her. I swiped open the dossier that my banker had sent over in the middle of the night. There was a photograph attached to the bio. It was a professional headshot, the kind that costs $500 and is designed to project approachable authority. He had sandy blonde hair, a square jaw, and the kind of easy, confident smile that comes from never having to worry about rent. I recognized him, not from real life, but from the background of a photo Lena had sent me 2 weeks ago. In that picture, he had been laughing, holding a glass of wine, with his arm draped possessively over my sister's shoulders. This was him. This was the man of high social standing. This was the man who required a cohesive family. This was the man Lena was so desperate to impress that she had erased her own sister from existence. And he was coming here, to my building, to my office, to decide if my company was worthy of his hospital's contract. The universe was not just knocking on my door, it was kicking it down. "Ms. Schwartz?" Elena asked, her voice wavering slightly. "Is there a problem? Do you want me to reschedule?" I stared at the face on the screen. I could have canceled. I could have claimed a family emergency. I could have delegated this meeting to my vice president of sales and spent the day at a spa, letting the irony wash over me in private. But I did not become the CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation by hiding. "No," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly so. "Do not reschedule. Confirmed for 9 o'clock. Elena nodded, relieved. "Understood. Is there anything specific you need for the presentation?" I stood up. I smoothed the lapels of my charcoal blazer. "I need everything," I said. "I want the main boardroom prep done immediately. Get the lighting adjusted to 70% brightness. Ensure the prototype is fully charged and the neural interface demo is running on the main screen, looping the success metrics from the last 3 clinical trials. And tell the engineering team I want them in the room. Standing, not sitting. We are not selling a product today. Elena, we are establishing dominance." "Yes, ma'am," she said, typing furiously. "And Elena," I added, "remove the water bottles. Replace them with crystal carafes and the heavy tumblers, the ones we use for the government contracts." "On it." She hurried out of the room, the heels of her shoes clicking a frantic rhythm on the hardwood. I was alone again. I looked around my office. It was a space designed to intimidate and inspire. Floor-to-ceiling windows, abstract art that cost more than my parents' house, and a desk made of reclaimed mahogany, but there were small touches of humanity here and there. A framed photo of a landscape I had taken on a hiking trip, a small knitted coaster that a niece, a cousin's child, had made for me, a stack of paperback novels on the side table. I moved with sudden, decisive swiftness. I opened my bottom drawer. I swept the landscape photo into it. I took the knitted coaster and buried it under a stack of files. I moved the novels into the cabinet and locked the door. I stripped the room of anything that suggested Autumn Schwartz was a person with hobbies, a past, or a heart. When Julian Thorpe walked in here, he would not see a woman. He would see an institution. He would see a machine of industry. I wanted no confusion. I wanted no accidental familiarity. If he saw a picture of a dog or a family vacation, he might try to make small talk. He might try to find common ground. There would be no common ground today. There would only be the high ground, and I was already standing on it. I sat back down and unlocked my phone. It was 8:15 in the morning. My thumb hovered over the Instagram icon. I knew I should not look. It was tactical suicide to let emotion infiltrate the war room, but I needed to know the enemy's position. I tapped the app. The algorithm, helpful as always, served my sister's post to the very top of my feed. It had been posted 2 hours ago. The location was tagged, "Home Sweet Home." The photo was high resolution, filtered to perfection. It showed my parents' living room. The tree was lit up with gold and silver ornaments. A fire was crackling in the background. In the foreground, there was a table set for breakfast, pancakes, fresh fruit, mimosas. My mother was laughing, her head thrown back. My father was wearing a Santa hat. looking jovial and relaxed, and there was Lena, wearing silk pajamas, holding a mug of cocoa with two hands, looking at the camera with a candid smile that I knew took 10 tries to get right. The caption read, "Christmas prep has officially begun. So grateful for a quiet, drama-free holiday with the people who matter most. Family is everything. Blessed Christmas countdown, peaceful. Drama-free." The phrase stuck in my throat like a shard of glass. I was the drama. I was the noise they had filtered out to achieve this perfect frequency of peace. I zoomed in on the corner of the photo. There was a fourth place setting at the table, an empty chair. It was waiting for Julian. He was likely on his way to the airport or already in the car, heading to the city for his business meeting before driving out to the suburbs to join them. They were celebrating my absence. They were relieved I was not there. I scrolled down to the comments. Aunt Margaret had written, "Looks beautiful. Where is Autumn?" Lena had replied, "She could not make it this year. Work is just so overwhelming for her right now. She needs time to sort herself out. We miss her, though." A lie wrapped in a hug. She did not miss me. She missed the extra buffer I provided. She framed my absence as my failure, my inability to cope, rather than her direct exclusion. I did not comment. I did not like the photo. I simply took a screenshot. Evidence. I placed the phone face down on the desk, the glass making a sharp clack against the wood. I closed my eyes and breathed in. 1, 2, 3. When I opened them, the hurt was gone. The sister who wanted to belong was gone. The daughter who craved approval was gone. In their place sat the CEO of Northline Medical Systems. I checked my watch, 8:45. The elevator banks outside my glass walls pinged softly. I stood up and walked to the door of my office, looking out over the open-plan floor where 50 of the brightest engineers in the country were working. The hum of activity was steady, reassuring. Elena appeared at my side. She looked pale. "They are here," she whispered. "They are in the lobby. Security is sending them up." "Good," I said. "Are you ready?" she asked. I adjusted the cuff of my silk blouse. I thought of the empty chair at my parents' table. I thought of the mess of my life. I thought of the $28,000 invoice I had paid for my father's car last month, which he thought was a loyalty reward from the dealership. "I have never been more ready, Elena," I said. The elevator doors at the far end of the hall slid open with a heavy pneumatic hiss. 3 men in dark suits stepped out. The man in the center was tall. He adjusted his tie as he stepped onto the floor, looking around with an air of critical appraisal. He looked like a man who was used to owning the room. He looked like a man who was used to people trying to impress him. He looked exactly like the man who was going to eat Christmas dinner in my seat. Julian Thorpe walked forward, his eyes scanning the office, looking for the person in charge. He walked past the engineers. He walked past the receptionist. His eyes landed on the glass walls of the corner office. His eyes landed on me. I did not smile. I did not wave. I simply stood there, framed by the skyline of the city I had conquered, and watched him walk into the trap he did not even know he had set. "Show them in," I said to Elena. The game had officially begun. To understand the absolute glacial calm I felt when Julian Thorpe walked into my lobby, you have to rewind the clock 12 hours. You have to go back to the night before, to Christmas Eve, the night my sister had explicitly forbidden me from attending. I was not sitting in a dark room crying over a tub of ice cream. I was not drunk dialing my ex-boyfriend or staring at old family albums. I was sitting on the floor of the server room with Marcus and Elena, eating spicy pad thai out of cardboard boxes. The server room is the warmest place in the building. It is kept at a precise temperature, but the exhaust from the racks creates a low, steady hum of heat that I find more comforting than any fireplace. We were working late, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. We were migrating a massive data set for a client in Tokyo, and the 3 of us decided that ensuring the integrity of 4 million patient records was a better use of our holiday than arguing about politics with distant relatives. But, as disciplined as I am still human, And humans are masochistic creatures who cannot resist looking at the things that hurt them. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, my phone buzzed. It was not a text. It was a notification from the social media app I had sworn not to check. Lena Schwartz added 14 new photos to the album. Our perfect Christmas. I wiped my hands on a napkin and picked up the phone. Marcus looked at me, a question in his eyes, but he did not say anything. He knew better. I tapped the screen. The first photo was a masterpiece of staging. It was the living room of my childhood home, but it looked like a set from a Hallmark movie. The lighting was golden and soft. The tree was buried under an avalanche of gifts wrapped in silver and navy blue paper, Julian's favorite colors, I assumed. And there they were. My parents were sitting on the beige sofa, holding glasses of champagne. They looked relaxed. They looked relieved. My mother was wearing the diamond earrings I had bought her 2 years ago for her 60th birthday, telling her I had found them at an estate sale for a bargain. In reality, they had cost $6,000. She was beaming at the camera, a look of pure, unadulterated pride on her face. But the centerpiece of the photo was Lena and Julian. They were standing by the fireplace. Julian was handsome in a way that suggested he played tennis on weekends and had never worried about an overdraft fee in his life. He had one hand in his pocket and the other resting casually on Lena's waist. And Lena, my sister, was glowing. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and a skirt that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She was looking up at Julian with an expression of adoration that made my stomach turn. It was the look of a woman who had finally secured the prize she had been hunting for her entire life. I swiped to the next photo. It was a candid shot of the dinner table. The china was the good set, the one my grandmother had left us. There were crystal goblets. There was a roast that looked perfectly cooked. The caption read, "So incredibly grateful for this moment. Stability, love, future, finally feeling like everything is falling into place. No drama, just peace. Merry Christmas to all." Stability. There was that word again. It was the weapon she had used to bludgeon me during our phone call. Your life is a mess. You are unstable. I scrolled down to the comments section. The validation was pouring in. "You two look amazing," wrote a cousin I hadn't seen in 5 years. "So happy for you, Lena. You deserve a good man," wrote one of her high school friends. And then, the inevitable question. Mrs. Higgins, our next-door neighbor from growing up, had commented, "Beautiful photos. But where is Autumn? Is she taking the picture?" I held my breath. Lena's reply had been posted 4 minutes ago. "No, Mrs. Higgins, Autumn couldn't make it this year. She is going through a bit of a rough patch and needs some time to herself to find her footing. She is not quite stable enough for big family gatherings right now. We are sending her love from afar." I stared at the words. Rough patch, not stable enough. She was painting a portrait of me as a broken woman, a recluse who could not be trusted around fine china and polite conversation. She was using my absence, an absence she had demanded, to bolster her own narrative of success. By casting me as the failure, she made herself look even more successful by comparison. "You are clenching your jaw," Marcus said. I looked up. I realized I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles were white. "Am I?" I asked. "You look like you're about to murder someone with a chopstick," Elena added, taking a sip of her diet soda. "Is it the family?" I turned the phone around and showed them the picture. "Meet Julian, the man we are meeting tomorrow morning, and meet my sister, who just told the entire internet that I am too unstable to eat turkey." Elena squinted at the screen. "Wait, that is the guy? The procurement VP?" "The very same. He looks—" Elena tilted her head. "He looks like he irons his socks." "He looks expensive," Marcus corrected, "which is good for us. Expensive people usually like to buy expensive software." I looked at my team. Marcus was wearing a faded hoodie that said NASA on it. He had a smudge of soy sauce on his chin. He was one of the most brilliant data architects in the Western Hemisphere. He had turned down job offers from Google and Apple to work with me because he believed in what we were doing. Elena was 24, with purple streaks in her hair and a work ethic that terrified me. She was currently running 3 different project timelines in her head and could spot a typo in a contract from 50 yards away. These were my people. There was no crystal glassware here. There was no expensive wine. We were drinking sparkling water and cheap soda. We were sitting on a linoleum floor under harsh fluorescent safety lights. And yet, looking at them, I realized something that made the knot in my chest loosen. I did not want to be at that dinner table. For years, I had convinced myself that I was missing out, that there was some magical warmth in that house that I was denied because of who I was. But looking at the photo, at the staged smiles, the performative happiness, the desperate need for validation, I realized it was all hollow. Lena was performing. My parents were performing. They were actors in a play called The Perfect Family, and they were terrified that if the audience looked too closely, they would see the cracks in the set. I was not performing. "You know what?" I said, tossing the phone onto a stack of server manuals. "Pass me the rest of the dumplings." Marcus grinned and slid the box over. "That is the spirit, boss." "Do you want to know the funny part?" I asked, stabbing a dumpling. "I paid for the table they are sitting at. I paid for the car in the driveway. I even paid for the dress Lena is wearing, indirectly, and yet I am the one who is finding her footing." "Let them think that," Elena said fiercely. "It makes the reveal better. It is like a superhero movie. You are Bruce Wayne. They think you are just a rich playboy. But really, I am not Batman." "Elena." I laughed. It was a real laugh. It felt rusty, but good. "You are better," Marcus said seriously. "Batman just beats people up. You are fixing the healthcare system." We sat there for another hour, talking. We did not talk about drama. We talked about the future. We talked about the implications of our new algorithm. We talked about where the company would be in 5 years. We talked about real things, substantial things. I realized that I did not feel lonely. I felt understood. At 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. I picked it up, expecting another dagger from the family group chat, but it was an email notification. It was from my personal assistant's automated system, confirming the final itinerary for the next day. Subject: Confirmation. St. Jude's Medical Group Delegation. Time: 9 o'clock a.m. Attendees: Julian Thorpe, VP, Sarah Jenkins, Legal, David Ross, Technical, Status: Confirmed. I stared at the screen. Julian Thorpe was currently sitting at my parents' table, probably eating a slice of pie, listening to my father tell the same fishing stories he had told for 20 years. He was probably thinking about how lucky he was to have found a normal girl like Lena, with a normal family, far away from the complexities of his high-pressure job. He had no idea that the unstable sister was currently reviewing his acquisition history and preparing to dismantle his negotiation strategy piece by piece. He had no idea that the woman he was avoiding tonight was the woman he would have to beg tomorrow. I stood up and brushed the crumbs off my pants. "All right," I said. "Party is over. Go home, get some sleep. I want everyone sharp tomorrow. We are not just closing a deal. We are making a statement." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said, standing up and stretching. "Good night, Autumn," Elena said. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," I replied. I walked back to my office alone. I stood by the window one last time. The city was quiet. Most of the office buildings were dark, their occupants home with their families, but my floor was still humming with the standby lights of the servers. I pulled up the photo on my phone one last time. I looked at Lena's smug smile. I looked at Julian's confident posture. I did not feel jealous anymore. I did not feel sad. I felt like a predator watching prey graze in an open field. "Enjoy your turkey, Julian," I whispered to the empty room. "Enjoy the wine. Enjoy the lie." I turned off my phone. I did not want to see any more notifications. I did not want to see any more fake joy. I walked over to the closet in my office where I kept my spare clothes. I pulled out the suit I had selected for tomorrow. It was a navy blue power suit, tailored to within an inch of its life. Sharp, professional, intimidating. I hung it on the back of my door, like a suit of armor waiting for its night. I turned off the lights in my office, plunging the room into darkness. I was not the girl who was left behind. I was the woman who had walked ahead. And tomorrow morning, when the sun came up and the hangover of Christmas faded, my family was going to wake up in a world that I controlled. I locked the door and walked to the elevator. I was ready. The air in the boardroom was rarefied, cooled to exactly 68 degrees, and smelled faintly of ozone and expensive leather. I stood at the head of the long table, my back to the panoramic view of the city. I was not looking at the view. I was watching the heavy oak double doors at the far end of the room. My team was in position. Marcus stood to my left, holding a tablet with the indifference of a man who knew his code was flawless. Elena was seated near the front, ready to take notes, her posture rigid. We were a phalanx. We were a fortress. At exactly 9 o'clock, the doors opened. My assistant from the outer reception desk stepped in first, holding the door wide. Then, the delegation from St. Jude's Medical Group entered. There were 4 of them, 2 men and 2 women, all dressed in the uniform of high-level corporate negotiation, dark suits, serious expressions, and leather portfolios, but I only saw one of them. Julian Thorpe walked in second. He looked exactly as he had in the photos, perhaps even more polished in person. He wore a navy suit that was tailored to accentuate his height, and he carried himself with the easy, rolling confidence of a man who expects doors to open for him. He was smiling slightly as he turned to say something to the woman beside him, a comment that made her chuckle politely. He was comfortable. He was in control. He was the prize catch who had spent the previous evening being worshipped by my family. Then he turned his head and looked down the length of the table. He saw the projection screen displaying the Northline Medical Systems logo. He saw Marcus. He saw Elena. And then he saw me. The reaction was instantaneous and visceral. It was not a dramatic gasp. In the corporate world, shock is micro-dampened. It was a stumble in his stride, a hesitation so slight that only someone watching him closely would have noticed. His smile did not just fade, it evaporated. He stopped moving. The person behind him nearly bumped into his back. I watched the recognition hit him in waves. First, there was confusion. He saw a woman who looked vaguely familiar. Second, there was realization. He recognized the face. He had likely seen it yesterday, perhaps in a dusty frame on my parents' mantelpiece, or in an old photo album Lena had shown him to illustrate how much better she had turned out compared to her siblings. Third, there was disbelief. He was trying to reconcile the data. He had been told that Autumn Schwartz was a mess. He had been told she was unstable. He had been told she was working some low-level administrative job and was currently having a mental breakdown that prevented her from attending Christmas dinner. And yet, here she was, standing at the head of a mahogany table in a corner office that cost more per year than his entire department's budget. I did not smile. I did not blink. I let the silence stretch out, taut and vibrating, for 5 full seconds. "Good morning," I said. My voice was low, clear, and devoid of any familial warmth. Julian's mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked at his colleagues, who were looking at him, waiting for him to lead the introduction. He had to pull himself together. He was a professional. "Good morning," he managed to say. His voice was a fraction of an octave higher than it should have been. He cleared his throat. I am Julian Thorpe, Vice President of Procurement for St. Jude's." He walked forward, his hand extended. It was a reflex. I took his hand. His palm was damp. His grip was weak, distracted. "I am Autumn Schwartz," I said, "founder and CEO of Northline Field Systems." The name landed like a physical blow. Schwartz. I saw his eyes widen. He was doing the math. The same last name, the same face. The coincidence was impossible. This was not a coincidence. "Schwartz," he repeated, almost breathless. "You are..." He stopped himself. He could not ask. He could not say. Are you the unstable sister I heard about over turkey and stuffing yesterday? It would be unprofessional. It would be insane. I am the person who is going to decide if your hospital gets access to our network today, I said, releasing his hand. Please, sit down. The command was soft, but it was absolute. Julian sat. He sank into the leather chair as if his legs had suddenly lost their structural integrity. He kept looking at me, his eyes darting from my face to the nameplate on the table, then back to my face. He looked like a man trying to solve a complex equation while the room was on fire. I turned to the rest of the room. Thank you all for coming, I said. I know your time is valuable, so I will not waste it with pleasantries. You are here because St. Jude's is facing a critical efficiency bottleneck in patient data transfer. You are losing 14% of your billable hours to administrative redundancy. You need a solution. I pressed a button on the remote in my hand. The screen behind me shifted. This is the bridge, I said. For the next 40 minutes, I did not speak as a sister. I did not speak as a daughter. I spoke as the architect of a system that was revolutionizing modern medicine. I walked them through the architecture of the neural network. I showed them the real-time case studies from the pilot programs in Seattle and Boston. I broke down the cost savings, projecting a recovery of $12 million in the first fiscal year alone. I was flawless. I knew every number. I knew every potential objection before they raised it. When the legal representative from their team asked about compliance with privacy laws, I quoted the specific statute and subsection from memory. When their technical lead asked about latency, Marcus stepped in and provided the data. But I finished the thought by explaining how that latency translated to patient outcomes in the emergency room. The room was captivated. The other 3 members of Julian's team were leaning forward, taking furious notes, nodding in agreement. They were seeing the future of their hospital, and they wanted it. But Julian was not taking notes. He was staring at me. He was watching the way I commanded the room. He was watching the way my staff looked at me, with absolute respect and a touch of reverence. He was listening to the precision of my language, the sharpness of my intellect. I could practically hear the gears grinding in his head. She is unstable. That was what Lena had said. She is a mess. That was what my mother had implied. She is a failure. That was the narrative. But the woman standing in front of him was not a failure. She was a titan. At one point, during a pause while Marcus was pulling up a schematic, Julian spoke up. Ms. Schwartz, he said. I turned to him. Yes, Mr. Thorpe? This system, he said, gesturing to the screen. You built this? I wrote the core kernel myself 7 years ago, I said. My team and I have spent the last decade refining it. 7 years, he echoed. So, while you were... He caught himself. He was about to reference something Lena had told him about my past. While you were working in administrative support? It was a test, a small, desperate probe to see if the 2 realities could coexist. I smiled. It was a cold, thin smile that did not reach my eyes. I find that discretion is an asset in this industry. Mr. Thorpe, I said. I do not broadcast my movements until the product is ready for market. Some people mistake silence for inactivity. That is usually a fatal error in judgment. The color drained from his face. He knew. He knew exactly what I was saying. I was telling him that everything he had been told was a lie. I was telling him that the woman he was dating, the family he was trying to impress, had built their entire perception of me on a foundation of sand. And I was washing it away. Right, he whispered. Fatal error. Shall we continue? I asked. I did not wait for an answer. I moved to the financial structuring of the deal. As I spoke, I walked around the table. I moved with deliberate, predatory grace. I stopped right behind Julian's chair as I explained the licensing tiers. The enterprise tier, I said, resting my hand on the back of his chair, requires a significant commitment. It is not for organizations that are unsure of their direction. It is for partners who value transparency, integrity, and long-term stability. I emphasized the word stability. I felt Julian stiffen. He could feel my presence looming over him. He was trapped. He could not run. He could not hide. He had to sit there and listen to the failure of the family, explain why his hospital needed her permission to survive the next decade. By the time the presentation ended, the dynamic in the room had shifted so completely that the air felt heavy. Julian's team was ecstatic. They were sold. The technical lead looked like he wanted to ask for my autograph. "This is incredible," the woman from legal said. "Truly, I have never seen an integration this seamless. Julian, we have to move on this." She turned to him. They all turned to him. Julian looked up at me. His eyes were wide, searching. He looked like a man who had woken up in a strange house and did not know where the exit was. He was realizing that Lena had lied to him, not just a small white lie, but a massive, structural fabrication. She had diminished her sister to make herself look bigger. She had painted me as a charity case to hide the fact that I was the sun in this solar system, and she was just a cold rock orbiting in the dark. "Yes," Julian said, his voice hoarse. We need to discuss the terms." "Excellent," I said. I walked back to the head of the table. "Elena has the contracts prepared. They are standard. I do not negotiate on the core terms. The price is the price. The timeline is the timeline." I looked directly at Julian. "I value honesty above all else, Mr. Thorpe," I said. "I assume you do too?" He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. "I do," he said. "I really do." "Good," I said. "Then we should have no problems." I signaled to Elena to distribute the documents. The meeting was technically over, but the real confrontation was just beginning. I could see it in Julian's eyes. He was not just thinking about the contract. He was thinking about the dinner he had eaten last night. He was thinking about the girl he was planning to propose to. He was thinking about the fact that he was currently sitting in the office of the woman he had been told to pity. He was beginning to understand that he was the one who needed pity. I capped my pen with a sharp click. The sound echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. "Review the paperwork," I said. "I will be in my office. Mr. Thorpe, when you are ready to sign, perhaps you and I can have a brief word in private to ensure our alignment?" It was an invitation to an execution. "Yes," Julian said. "I would like that." I turned and walked out of the boardroom. I did not look back. I felt the adrenaline singing in my veins. It was not the rush of revenge, it was the rush of justice. The truth had arrived, and it was wearing a navy blue suit and charging $500 an hour for consulting fees. The heavy oak door clicked shut, sealing the two of us inside my office. The sound was final. Like the closing of a vault, the sudden silence was absolute, cutting off the hum of the busy floor outside. Julian stood in the center of the room. He looked out of place against the backdrop of the city skyline, which was ironic given that 10 minutes ago, he had walked in here looking like he owned the world. Now, stripped of his team and his assumptions, he looked smaller. He looked like a man who had stepped onto a frozen lake, only to hear the ice crack beneath his feet. I walked behind my desk and sat down. I did not invite him to sit. I simply waited. He turned to face me, his hands clasping and unclasping at his sides. He was struggling to find the right opening, the right tone. How do you speak to a woman who is simultaneously your potential sister-in-law and the CEO who just handed you the most important contract of your career? "Autumn," he started, then stopped. He cleared his throat. "Ms. Schwartz?" "Autumn is fine," I said. "We are practically family, after all." The word family hung in the air, sharp and jagged. He flinched. He walked over to one of the guest chairs and gripped the back of it, needing something solid to hold on to. "I need to apologize," he said. His voice was low, strained. "I had no idea. I truly had no idea." "About what?" I asked. I picked up a pen and twirled it between my fingers. I wanted him to say it. I wanted him to articulate the lie. "About this." He gestured vaguely around the room, encompassing the glass walls, the high-end art, the atmosphere of unyielding power. "About who you are," Lena told me. He trailed off, looking down at the carpet. "What did Lena tell you, Julian?" I asked softly. "I am curious. What is the official dossier on Autumn Schwartz these days?" He looked up, meeting my eyes. There was a mixture of shame and confusion in his gaze. "She told me you were struggling. She said you worked a temp job at a hospital, filing papers. She said you had trouble holding down a position because of your anxiety." "Anxiety," I repeated. "Interesting. She said you lived in a small apartment uptown because you could not afford anything else," he continued, the words tumbling out now that the dam had broken. "She said the family had to help you out financially, that you were fragile, that you needed to be protected." I leaned back in my chair. The narrative was even more pathetic than I had imagined. They had not just painted me as a failure, they had painted me as a charity case. They had turned me into a burden so they could feel like saints for tolerating me. "And you believed her," I stated. It was not a question. "Why wouldn't I?" Julian asked, defensive now. "She is your sister. Why would a sister lie about something like that?" "That is the wrong question, Julian," I said. "The question is not why she would lie. The question is why you accepted it without a single shred of evidence." I stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against the edge, crossing my arms. "You are a vice president of procurement," I said. "Your entire job is due diligence. You vet vendors, you check references, you analyze financial stability, and yet, when you were presented with a narrative about a woman you had never met, you swallowed it whole because it fit the picture you wanted to see." "That is not fair," he protested weakly. "Is it not?" I countered. "Did you ever ask to see where I worked? Did you ever ask me a single question about my life? Or did you just enjoy the role of the stability bringer? It felt good, didn't it? To be the successful boyfriend entering a family that had one broken child. It made you feel superior. It made Lena look like the saint who puts up with the difficult sister." Julian stared at me, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. I had struck the nerve. I had dismantled the ego that Lena had been feeding for 3 months. I never thought of it like that," he whispered. "No," I said. "You didn't think at all. You just consumed the story." He let go of the chair and ran a hand through his hair. He looked exhausted. The confident executive was gone, replaced by a man who was realizing his reality was a fabrication. "She told me you were uninvited from Christmas because you were having an episode," he said. "She said you were manic, that you would ruin the dinner." "And yet," I said, gesturing to the contract on my desk, "I seem to be capable of running a multi-million-dollar corporation and conducting a high-level negotiation without having an episode. Do I look manic to you, Julian?" "No," he said. "You look terrifyingly competent." "Then one of two things is true," I said calmly. "Either I have made a miraculous recovery in the last 12 hours, or my sister is a liar." The word liar sat between us. He did not argue with it. He could not. The evidence was all around him. "Why?" he asked. "Why would she do this? Why would your parents go along with it?" "Because success is relative," I explained, keeping my voice devoid of emotion. "Lena needs to shine, for her to be the golden child. Someone has to be the dross. If I am successful, if I am more successful than she is, then her narrative collapses. My parents need to feel needed. If I am independent, powerful, and wealthy, they lose their role as the benevolent caretakers. So, they rewrite reality. They diminish me to elevate themselves." I walked over to the window and looked out. "I played along for a long time," I said, my back to him. "I thought it was the price of admission to the family. I thought if I let them feel superior, they would love me. But yesterday, when Lena told me my life was a mess and that I wasn't good enough to sit at the same table as you, I realized the price had gone up. It was no longer enough to be humble. I had to be invisible." I turned back to him. "I am done being invisible." Julian looked sick. He sank into the chair, putting his head in his hands. "I sat there," he muttered. "I sat at their table last night. I drank their wine. I listened to Lena talk about how worried she was about you. I listened to your mother sigh and say she prayed for you. He looked up, his eyes wide with horror. It was all a performance. Yes, I said. It was, and I was the audience. You were the prop, I corrected, just like I was. He stood up abruptly, pacing a small circle in front of my desk. I don't even know what to do, he said. I am supposed to go back there tonight. We have dinner plans with your aunt. That is your choice, I said. He looked at me, searching for direction. Are you going to tell them about this? About us meeting? I am not going to tell them anything, I said. I do not owe them an update on my professional schedule, but I imagine you will find it difficult to sit through another course of their lives, now that you know the truth. Does she know? He asked suddenly. Does Lena know you are this? She knows I work in tech, I said. She knows I do well, but she chooses to filter that information through a lens that makes it small. She thinks I am a mid-level manager. She has no idea I own the company. She has no idea I own the building. She has no idea that the loan she got approved for last year was personally underwritten by me. Julian stopped pacing. You underwrote her loan? I have paid for a great many things, Julian, I said. Anonymity has its privileges. I could help them without them resenting me for it. But that stops today. He looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't just respect. It was fear. He realized the magnitude of the power dynamic shift. He realized that the woman he had been pitying was actually the patron saint of the family he was trying to marry into. I feel like a fool, he said quietly. You were manipulated, I said. It happens. The question is what you do now that you have the data. He looked at the door. He looked back at me. I am not here to ruin your relationship, Julian, I said, returning to my seat behind the desk. I am not here to break up you and Lena. If you want to be with her, be with her. That is your business. But do not expect me to play the role of the broken sister anymore. If you come to my office, you treat me as a CEO. If you see me at a family gathering, if I ever choose to attend one again, you treat me with respect. Is that understood? Yes, he said immediately. Absolutely. Good. I picked up the contract. Then we have nothing more to discuss personally. I opened the folder. I pointed to the signature line on the bottom of page 30. This is the standard agreement, I said, switching seamlessly back to business mode. It guarantees a 3-year rollout with a 2-year maintenance tail. The pricing is fixed. The IP remains ours. He looked at the paper. He looked at me. He seemed to be struggling to process the whiplash between the personal revelation and the professional obligation. You still want to do business with us? He asked. After everything? Jude's is a good hospital, I said. My feelings about your girlfriend are irrelevant to the quality of care your patients deserve. I do not let emotions dictate my P&L statement. Julian, that is why I am the CEO, and Lena is whatever Lena is. He took the pen. His hand was shaking slightly. He signed his name. Thank you, he said, for being professional. You had every right to throw me out of this office. I know, I said, but that would have been messy, and as you were told, I am the one who is supposed to be messy. I took the folder back. I checked the signature. It was valid. Goodbye, Julian, I said. My assistant will email you the countersigned copies. He stood up. He lingered for a moment, as if he wanted to say something else, perhaps to ask for forgiveness, or to offer to fix things, but he saw the look on my face. It was not a look of invitation. It was a wall of bulletproof glass. Goodbye, Autumn, he said. He turned and walked to the door. He opened it and stepped out into the bustling office. He walked slowly, his shoulders slumped, carrying the weight of a truth that was far heavier than the portfolio under his arm. I watched the door close. I was alone again. I did not celebrate. I did not pump my fist in the air. I simply uncapped my pen and signed my name next to his. Autumn Schwartz. The ink was black and sharp. I had not raised my voice once. I had not shed a tear. I had not insulted my sister or disparaged my parents. I had simply turned on the lights, and the shadows they had cast over me had vanished. I picked up the phone and dialed Elena. "The contract is signed," I said. "Process it." "And Elena?" "Yes, ma'am?" "Order lunch for the team," I said. "From that expensive place on the corner. On me. We have something to celebrate." "What are we celebrating?" she asked. "Clarity," I said. "We are celebrating absolute clarity." I hung up the phone. I turned my chair to face the window again. The city was bright and cold and honest. Julian was going back to the suburbs now. He was going back to the warm, cozy lie. But he was bringing the cold truth with him, buried in his chest like a ticking clock. I wondered how long he would last. I wondered how long it would take before he looked at Lena and saw the manipulation instead of the smile. I gave it 48 hours. But for now, I had a company to run, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't running it from the shadows. I was running it in the light. The silence that followed Julian's departure lasted exactly 42 minutes. I spent that time answering emails, reviewing the code for the new interface update, and drinking a cup of chamomile tea. I was not hiding. I was not pacing. I was simply waiting for the inevitable explosion. It began with a vibration on my desk. My personal cell phone lit up. The name on the screen was Lena. I looked at it for a moment, watching the letters dance. I knew what was happening on the other end of that line. Julian had likely called her from his car. He was a smart man, but he was also a man in shock. And men in shock tend to seek immediate answers. He would have asked her why her unstable sister was running a billion-dollar company. He would have asked her why she had lied. And Lena, unable to process her own deceit, would do what she always did. She would look for a scapegoat. I picked up the phone. I did not say hello. I simply pressed the green button and held the device to my ear. "You bitch." The scream was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my head. It was a raw, guttural sound, wet with tears and trembling with rage. "You did this on purpose," Lena shrieked. You knew he was coming. You planned this entire thing just to humiliate me." I waited for her to take a breath. In the background, I could hear other voices. My mother was crying. My father was shouting something indistinguishable. They were all there, gathered in the living room that had been staged for perfection, now unraveling into chaos. "Are you finished?" I asked. My voice was calm, the same tone I used when a vendor missed a delivery deadline. No, I am not finished," she screamed. "Julian just called me. He sounded different. He asked me if I knew who you were. He asked me if I knew you were the CEO. He accused me of lying to him. Autumn. He said he needs space to think. Space. He was supposed to propose on New Year's Eve, and now he wants space." "That sounds like a prudent decision on his part," I said. "How dare you?" This time it was my mother's voice. She had evidently snatched the phone from Lena. "Autumn, what is wrong with you? Your sister called us in tears. She says you ambushed Julian. She says you tried to destroy his opinion of her." "I did no such thing," I said. "I conducted a business meeting." "Do not play games with me," my mother snapped. Her voice was shaking, not with sadness, but with the indignation of a director whose play has gone off script. "You knew he was her boyfriend. You should have recused yourself. You should have, I don't know, called in sick. You should have hidden." "Hidden?" I repeated. "I was in my own office, Mother, in the building that I lease, running the company that I founded. You wanted me to hide under my desk because Lena's boyfriend walked into the wrong room? You could have handled it differently." Lena's voice was back, shrill and desperate. "You could have pretended. You could have just acted like normal. Why did you have to show off? Why did you have to rub it in his face?" "Show off?" I laughed, a short, dry sound. I showed him a slide deck about data interoperability. "Lena, I showed him how to save his hospital $12 million a year. If that is showing off, then yes, I am guilty. But I think what you are really upset about is that I didn't play the character you wrote for me." "You ruined my life," she sobbed. "He thinks I am a liar now." Are you not? I asked. The line went dead silent for a heartbeat. The background noise of my father's muttering stopped. What did you say? Lena whispered. I asked if you were a liar, I said, leaning back in my chair. Did you, or did you not, tell Julian Thorpe that I was an administrative assistant? Lena stammered. I simplified it. Did you, or did you not, tell him I was mentally unstable? I continued, pressing the advantage. Did you tell him I was having a manic episode? Did you tell him I was uninvited from Christmas because I was a mess who could not be trusted in polite society? I was protecting you, she yelled, but the conviction was gone. It was a desperate defense mechanism now. I was trying to explain why you are so weird, why you are so distant. I didn't want him to think you were just a cold, arrogant workaholic, so I gave you a reason. You gave me a pathology, I corrected. You diagnosed me to make yourself look like the saint who tolerates the broken sister, and you did it because you were terrified. Terrified of what? She spat. Terrified that if he saw me, the real me, he would realize that you are not the prize of the Schwartz family, I said. You were scared he would compare us. That is insane, she said. I am the one with the life. I am the one with the friends, the social calendar, the personality. You are just a robot with a bank account. And yet, I said softly, he walked out of my office with a signed contract and a newfound respect for the name Schwartz. And he walked away from your phone call with doubts. Who is winning? Lena? Dad! Lena screamed, turning away from the phone. Talk to her! Make her fix this! There was a shuffling sound, and then my father's heavy breathing filled the line. Autumn, he said. His voice was stern, the voice he used when I was a teenager and had missed curfew. This has gone too far. You need to call Julian back. You need to tell him there was a misunderstanding. You need to tell him that you were exaggerating your role. Tell him it is a small company. Tell him you are just a figurehead. Fix this for your sister. I closed my eyes. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. Even now, with the truth staring them in the face, they were asking me to dim the lights. They were asking me to dismantle my reality to prop up Lena's delusion. No, I said. Excuse me, my father said, stunned. I am your father. And I am a 35-year-old CEO, I said. I am not going to call a business partner and lie to him to save Lena's dating life. I am not going to commit fraud. Dad, do you understand that? Telling a publicly traded hospital that I'm not really in charge of the company I signed a contract with is fraud. It is illegal. It is also pathetic. We are family, he shouted. Family helps each other. Like you helped me? I asked. Like you helped me when you sat there and let Lena uninvite me from Christmas? Like you helped me when you let her paint me as a failure to a stranger? You didn't want a family. Dad, you wanted an audience for Lena. Well, the show is over. The curtain is down. You are being cruel. My mother's voice drifted in from the background, weak and tearful. We loved you. We always loved you. You loved the version of me that made you feel comfortable, I said. You loved the Autumn who paid for your car repairs without asking for credit. You loved the Autumn who stayed quiet so Lena could talk. But you do not love me. You don't even know me. That is not true, my father said, but his voice lacked force. He was remembering. He was remembering the checks. He was remembering the lucky breaks that had saved him from bankruptcy. He was starting to connect the dots, and the picture was making him sick. Ask Lena, I said. Ask her what she is really afraid of. Is she afraid of losing Julian? Or is she afraid that now that he knows the truth, he will wonder what else she has lied about? Shut up, Lena shrieked from the background. Just shut up. I am hanging up now, I said. I have work to do, unlike you. Lena, I do not have the luxury of spending my day crying over a man I tried to manipulate. I have a company to run. If you hang up, Lena threatened, her voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. Don't bother coming home, ever. You are dead to us. I looked around my office. I looked at the award on my shelf for Innovator of the Year. I looked at the photo of my team. I looked at the city that I had made my own. "Lena," I said, my voice steady and final, "I haven't been home in 10 years. I have just been visiting a house where I used to live. There is a difference." I ended the call. I did not slam the phone down. I placed it gently on the desk. The silence returned, but this time, it was different. It wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a severance. The cord had been cut. The infection had been removed. My hands were not shaking. My heart was not racing. I felt a profound sense of lightness, as if a heavy coat had been lifted from my shoulders after a long winter. They were panicking now. I knew exactly what was happening in that house. Lena was spiraling, trying to spin a new web of lies to catch Julian before he drifted too far. My parents were sitting in the wreckage of their denial, looking at the expensive furniture and the lavish decorations, suddenly wondering who had actually paid for it all. They were realizing that the mess they had looked down on was the only thing that had been holding them up. My computer pinged. It was an email from Julian. Subject: contract. Message: the legal team has received the documents. We are moving forward. Also, I would like to request a follow-up meeting next week, alone, to discuss implementation and perhaps to apologize properly. I stared at the screen. Julian was not running away. He was pivoting. He was drawn to the competence. He was drawn to the truth. Lena had tried to keep us apart to save herself, but in doing so, she had created the very collision she feared most. I typed a reply. Meeting confirmed. Tuesday, 10 o'clock. I hit send. The family was shattered. The lines were drawn. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing on the side of the losers, hoping to be picked. I was standing in the center of the arena, and I was the one making the rules. I went back to work. There were still 3 hours left in the business day, and I had no intention of wasting them on grief. Grief is for things you have lost. I hadn't lost anything today. I had simply thrown away the trash. 2 days after the phone call that fractured my family, the reception desk in the lobby called up to my office. It was 11 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was reviewing the beta test results for our new surgical interface when the intercom buzzed. "Ms. Schwartz," the receptionist said, her voice professional but slightly hesitant. "There are 2 people here to see you, a Mr. and Mrs. Schwartz. They say they are your parents. They do not have an appointment." I stared at the speaker. I had expected silence. I had expected them to retreat into their suburban fortress and nurse their wounded pride. I had not expected them to drive 2 hours into the city, to stand in the lobby of a building they likely found intimidating. "Send them up," I said. I stood up and walked to the glass wall that separated my office from the main floor. I wanted to see them before they saw me. I wanted to see them experience the reality of my world. The elevator doors opened at the far end of the floor. My parents stepped out. They looked small. That was my first thought. In the house where I grew up, my father always seemed to fill the room, his voice booming, his presence taking up all the available oxygen. My mother was the curator of that space, always moving, always directing. But here, in the cavernous, open-plan workspace of Northline Field Systems, under the cool industrial lighting and surrounded by 50 focused engineers, they looked shrunken. My father was wearing his Sunday suit, the one he wore to weddings and funerals. It looked dated. My mother was clutching her purse with both hands, her knuckles white. She looked around at the rows of monitors, the quiet intensity of the staff, the sheer scale of the operation. Elena met them at the elevator. I watched her greet them. I saw my father look at Elena, then look past her to the logo on the wall, a stylized silver N that I had designed on a napkin 8 years ago. He ran a hand over his face. They walked down the long aisle toward my office. My employees did not stop working, but heads turned. They sensed the energy shift. They saw 2 people who clearly did not belong in this ecosystem of high-speed data and 9-figure contracts. When they reached my door, I opened it. "Come in," I said. They stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind them, cutting off the hum of the floor. My mother looked at the view. The panoramic sweep of Chicago was breathtaking from this height, but she looked at it as if it were a threat. My father looked at the desk. It was a massive slab of reclaimed wood, devoid of clutter, imposing and severe. "Autumn," my mother said. Her voice was thin. She looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time in years, she did not see the daughter she had pitied. She saw a woman in a tailored silk blouse standing in a room that radiated power. "Sit down," I said. I pointed to the 2 leather chairs opposite my desk. They sat. My father sank into the leather as if he were exhausted. He placed his hat on his knee. "We didn't know," my mother whispered. Tears were already welling in her eyes. It was her default defense mechanism. Tears meant she was the victim. Tears meant I was supposed to comfort her. "We had no idea it was this big. Lena said you were doing data entry. She said you were just getting by." "And you never checked," I said. I did not offer her a tissue. I sat behind my desk, keeping the barrier between us. "You never asked for a business card. You never Googled the company name I gave you. You were content with the version of me that Lena created because it was easier for you." "We were not content," my father said. His voice was raspy. He cleared his throat. "We worried about you. We laid awake at night worrying about your future." "Did you?" I asked. "Or did you worry about how my lack of a future reflected on you?" Because from where I sat, the worry always sounded a lot like embarrassment. My father looked down at his hands. They were rough. Working hands. He had spent his life as a contractor, building houses for other people. He understood structures. He understood foundations. And sitting here, looking at the architecture of my success, he was realizing that he had completely misjudged the structural integrity of his own family. "This place," my father said, gesturing vaguely. "You own this?" "I founded it," I said. "I own 51% of the controlling stock. The rest is publicly traded." "Publicly traded," he echoed. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. He looked around the room again. His eyes landed on a framed photo on the credenza. It was not a family photo. It was a picture of me shaking hands with the governor when we secured the state hospital contract 3 years ago. "The money," my father said. He looked up at me, his eyes sharp with a sudden, painful realization. "The car, the surgery, the roof." "Yes," I said. "You told us it was insurance," he said. "You told us it was a grant program." "I lied," I said, "because if I had told you the money came from me, you would have felt small, and you hate feeling small. You need to be the provider, Dad. So I let you be the provider. I let you think you were lucky, rather than admitting you were supported by the daughter you thought was a failure." He flinched. The color drained from his face, leaving it gray and old. The shame in his eyes was visceral. It is a terrible thing for a father to realize that the child he condescended to has been secretly holding a safety net under him for a decade. "Autumn, please," my mother sobbed. She reached across the desk, trying to touch my hand. I did not pull away, but I did not reach back. "We are your parents. We love you. We got used to a certain dynamic. Lena is so loud. She demands so much attention. You were always so quiet. We thought you were struggling. We wanted to help you by not putting pressure on you." "You didn't help me," I said. "You erased me." "We are sorry," she cried. "I am so sorry. Autumn, we should have seen. We should have asked. Please, can't we just start over? Now that we know, we can fix this. You can come to Christmas next year. We will tell everyone. We will tell them how successful you are." I laughed. It was a soft, sad sound. "That is exactly the problem. Mother," I said, "you want to tell them how successful I am. You want to parade me around now. Yesterday, I was ashamed to be hidden. Today, because you see this office, because you smell the money. Suddenly I am a trophy to be displayed." "That is not fair," she protested. "It is the truth," I said. "You don't value me. You value the status. If I were a teacher, or a nurse, or an artist struggling to pay rent, I would still be the same person. I would still be worthy of love and respect, but to you, that version of Autumn wasn't enough to get a seat at the dinner table. I leaned forward. This was the question that had been burning in my chest for 48 hours. The question that would determine if there was anything left to salvage. Ask yourselves this, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. If Julian hadn't walked into this office, if he hadn't seen the truth and forced you to confront it, would you be here right now? The room went dead silent. My mother stopped crying. She froze, a tissue halfway to her face. My father looked at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. If I were still the Autumn you thought I was, I continued, the Autumn who was unstable and messy, would you have driven 2 hours to come see me? Would you have come to apologize for uninviting me? Or would you have spent Christmas enjoying your peaceful, perfect dinner without me, patting yourselves on the back for giving me space? The silence stretched out. It was heavy and suffocating. The air conditioning hummed, indifferent to the human tragedy unfolding in the room. They did not answer. They could not answer. Because the answer was no. If Julian hadn't found me, they would have left me in the dark forever. They were only here because the lights had been turned on, and they were afraid of what the neighbors would think when they realized the Schwartz family had discarded their most successful child. That is what I thought, I said. I sat back. I felt a strange sense of finality. The hope that I hadn't realized I was still holding on to, the hope that they just needed to understand me to love me, finally evaporated. So here is how this is going to work, I said. I switched to my business voice. It was the only way I could get through this without breaking. I am not cutting you off. I am not vindictive. I will not demand that you pay back the money I have given you over the years. Consider it a gift for raising me. My father winced. The idea of his daughter's charity being confirmed was a blow to his ego that would likely never heal. But the dynamic changes today, I said. I am not your secret. I am not your shame. And I am certainly not your bank account. We don't want your money, my father muttered. Good, I said, because the automatic transfers have already been canceled. From now on, if you need something, you ask. You ask me as an adult. You ask me with respect. And Lena? My mother asked weakly. She is devastated. Autumn, she is your sister. Lena is a grown woman who played a dangerous game and lost. I said, I will not fix this for her. I will not lie to Julian. If she wants to salvage her relationship, she can do it with the truth. If she wants a relationship with me, she can start by apologizing for the character assassination she performed on me for the last 3 years. I stood up. It was a dismissal. My parents looked at each other. They looked lost. They had walked in here expecting to find a way to drag me back into the fold, to make me fit into the box again, perhaps a slightly nicer box this time, but they realized now that the box was gone. They stood up slowly. My father looked older than he had when he walked in. His shoulders were slumped. We are proud of you, Autumn, he said. The words felt clumsy, foreign on his tongue. I know you are, I said. But Dad, I don't need you to be proud of me. I accomplished all of this without your pride. What I needed was for you to be kind to me. He flinched as if I had slapped him. They walked to the door. My mother paused, looking back, waiting for me to run to her, to hug her, to tell her that family comes first. I stayed behind my desk. I stood tall. I stood still. Goodbye, I said. They walked out. I watched through the glass wall as they walked back down the long aisle of the office. They looked like ghosts fading into the background of a world that was too bright, too fast, and too real for them. When the elevator doors closed, swallowing them whole, I did not cry. I sat back down in my chair. I looked at the city of Chicago spread out before me, a grid of steel and light. I felt a profound sense of loss. Yes, it is a terrible thing to bury parents who are still alive, but underneath the loss, there was something else. Peace. I had asked for the truth. I had received it, and for the first time in 35 years, I did not have to pretend to be anything other than exactly who I was. If silence is a weapon, then for the next 5 days, I was a sniper lying in the grass, waiting for the target to walk into the crosshairs. Lena did not take my silence well. In the ecosystem of our family, silence was a vacuum, and Lena abhorred a vacuum. She needed noise. She needed friction. She needed to be the protagonist of a tragedy. And a tragedy requires a villain. Since I refused to pick up the phone and scream back at her, she took the battle to the only arena where she felt she had the advantage. The internet. It started subtly. On Wednesday morning, 12 hours after I had evicted my parents from my office, a post appeared on Lena's social media. It was a black square with white text, a quote about betrayal. Some people will step on their own family to climb the ladder of success. Never forget who held you when you were small. It was vague enough to be deniable, but specific enough to act as a dog whistle to the extended family. By Wednesday afternoon, the flying monkeys had been deployed. My phone began to light up with messages from aunts, cousins, and distant relatives I hadn't spoken to since the Bush administration. Aunt Margaret texted, "I saw your mother today. She is heartbroken. I do not know what kind of big-shot job you have now, but you do not turn your back on blood. Call your sister." Cousin Sarah, whom I had not seen since her second wedding 4 years ago, sent a long paragraph on Facebook. "I heard what you did to Lena's boyfriend. Trying to steal him? Really, Autumn? I always knew you were jealous of her, but this is a new low. Get help." I did not reply. I did not block them. I did not engage. Instead, I opened a new encrypted file on my secure server. I named it Case Study, Schwartz Liquidation. Every text message was screenshotted and uploaded. Every social media post was archived with a timestamp. Every voicemail was transcribed and tagged. I was not building a defense. I was building an autopsy report. Lena mistook my silence for weakness. She thought I was hiding, cowering in my tower. Shamed by the sudden onslaught of familial disapproval, she ramped up the pressure. On Thursday, the narrative shifted. She stopped being vague. She posted a long, emotional essay about emotional abuse and financial manipulation. She claimed that she had been supporting a troubled sibling for years, only for that sibling to turn around and try to sabotage her relationship out of spite. She was projecting so hard she could have been in IMAX theater. I sat in my office, drinking black coffee, reading her lies on one monitor while tracking the real-time revenue of my company on the other. "She is getting engagement," Elena noted. Standing behind my chair, she was holding a tablet, monitoring the social sentiment. 30 likes, 12 comments, mostly sympathetic. People love a victim, Ms. Schwartz. "Let her have the likes, Elena," I said, not looking away from the screen. "I am not interested in public opinion. I am interested in the truth." "She is tagging St. Jude's Medical Group in her stories now," Elena warned. "She is trying to get their attention." I stopped typing. I looked at the screen. Lena had indeed tagged the hospital. She hadn't said anything legally actionable yet, just vague posts about unethical partners and bad vibes. But she was dancing on the edge of a razor blade. "She is trying to poison the well," I said. "She knows she can't hurt me directly, so she is trying to hurt the contract." "Should we issue a cease and desist?" Elena asked. "Legal can have one drafted in 20 minutes. "No," I said. "A cease and desist looks like fear. It looks like I have something to hide. Besides, never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake." And Lena was making a massive mistake. She was assuming that the professional world operated on the same currency as her social circle. She thought that feelings and rumors held the same weight as data and contracts. She did not understand that by dragging a billion-dollar merger into her personal drama, she was not exposing me. She was exposing her own liability. On Friday morning, the inevitable happened. My office line rang. It was the front desk. "Ms. Schwartz," the receptionist said. "I have a call on line 2, a woman claiming to be your sister. She demanded to be put through to the legal department, but I routed her here." I pressed the speaker button. "Connect it, but keep it on mute on my end. I want to hear this." The line clicked. "Hello?" Lena's voice came through. It was high, breathless. the voice of someone running on adrenaline and panic. Is this the legal department? I need to speak to someone about Autumn Schwartz. I have information that is relevant to your current negotiations. I signaled to Elena. She hit the record button on her console. This is the executive office, Elena said, her voice smooth and professional. How can I help you, ma'am? She is a fraud, Lena said. She wasn't crying now. She was manic. I don't know what she told you, or what kind of fake credentials she showed you, but she is mentally incompetent. I have medical records. Well, I can get medical records. She has a history of delusions. You can't sign a contract with her. She will destroy your project. I see, Elena said, her eyes locked on mine. And who am I speaking to? I am her sister, Lena said. I am the one who has been taking care of her. I am trying to save you guys a lawsuit. You need to drop her. You need to cancel the deal. And tell Julian. Tell Mr. Thorpe that he needs to call me. Tell him I am trying to protect him. Thank you for the information, Elena said. We will document this call. Wait, are you going to? Elena cut the line. The room was silent. That was tortious interference, Elena said quietly. She just tried to sabotage a corporate contract. That is a felony in some jurisdictions, a massive civil liability in all of them. She is desperate, I said. Julian hasn't called her back, has he? Mr. Thorpe has been in meetings with our integration team all morning. Elena confirmed. He has his phone off. I stood up and walked to the window. Lena had just handed me the gun. She had crossed the line from family drama into corporate sabotage. She had tried to destroy my livelihood because I refused to play along with her lie. Pull the files, I said. Which ones? Elena asked. All of them, I said. The bank transfers, the deed to the house, the tuition payments for her graphic design course that she never finished, the car insurance payments, the emails where she asked for loans that were never repaid. Compile it into a single timeline. Contrast her public statements with the financial reality. You are going to expose her? No, I said. I am going to end it, but I am going to do it face to face. I sat back down and opened my email. I typed a message to Julian. Subject: Implementation Meeting. Julian, regarding our meeting on Tuesday, I believe it would be beneficial to clear the air completely before we proceed with the technical integration. My sister seems to be under the impression that there is still a debate regarding my competency. I would like to invite her to join us for the final 10 minutes of our session. I believe a direct confrontation with the facts will be healthy for everyone. Julian's reply came 3 minutes later. She has been calling my office nonstop. My secretary is getting worried. I agree. It needs to stop. I will tell her to come. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction. Julian was tired. The shine had worn off. He was seeing the hysteria for what it was, and he wanted it to end just as much as I did. I spent the rest of the weekend preparing. I did not prepare like a sister. I prepared like a prosecutor. I printed out 10 years of bank statements. I highlighted every single transaction where money moved from my account to a Schwartz family member. August 2018, $6,000, memo. Mom's dental work. January 2020, $12,000, memo. Lena's credit card debt consolidation. March 2022, $28,000, memo. Dad's truck. The total was staggering. Just over $400,000 in 10 years. Nearly $500,000 that I had poured into the black hole of their validation, only to be called unstable the moment I stopped signing checks. I created a visual timeline. On the left, I put Lena's social media posts, the photos of her vacations, her new clothes, her independent lifestyle. On the right, I put the corresponding wire transfers from my account that paid for them. It was a brutal mathematical deconstruction of her entire identity. On Sunday night, my phone buzzed with one final text from Lena. Julian told me we are meeting on Tuesday. Finally, you better be ready. Autumn, I am bringing everything. I am going to expose you for the fraud you are. Dad is coming too. We are not going to let you ruin this family. She thought she was coming to an intervention. She thought she was bringing an army to bully me back into submission. She thought that if she yelled loud enough, the truth would bend to her will. She had no idea that she was walking into a coroner's inquest. I did not reply. I turned off my phone. I went to the gym in my building and ran for 10 miles. I slept for 8 hours. When Tuesday morning came, I dressed with the same care I would take for a board meeting. I wore white. It is a color that projects innocence, but in the wild, it is the color of bone. I arrived at the office at 7. I set up the conference room myself. I placed 3 folders on the table, one for Julian, one for my father, one for Lena. Inside were the receipts of their lives. I sat at the head of the table and watched the clock. The second hand swept around the face in a smooth, relentless circle. Tick, tick, tick. They were coming to destroy me. They were coming to bury me under a mountain of shame and guilt. But they forgot one thing. I own the shovels. The conference room clock on the wall ticked forward to 10 o'clock in the morning. It was a sterile, unforgiving sound. Julian was already seated to my right. He had arrived 10 minutes early, looking tired and pale. The look of a man who had not slept well in days. We had barely spoken. Just a nod of acknowledgement. He knew what was coming. He just did not know the magnitude of it. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door opened. Lena walked in first. She was wearing a red dress, a color chosen to draw the eye, to assert dominance, but her eyes were rimmed with red, and her makeup was applied a little too heavily, trying to mask the cracks in her composure. Behind her walked my father, looking like a man marching to the gallows, and behind him was Aunt Margaret. This was her witness. Aunt Margaret was the family historian, the keeper of grudges, the woman who had whispered for 20 years that I was cold and unfeeling simply because I preferred reading books to gossiping in the kitchen. They sat on the opposite side of the table. The battle lines were drawn. Me and Julian on one side, the Schwartz family fiction on the other. "Let's get this over with," Lena said, slamming a thin file onto the table. "I have brought character statements. I have brought Aunt Margaret to testify to your history of erratic behavior. We are going to prove to Julian that you are not fit to be a partner in this deal." She looked at Julian, her eyes pleading. "Honey, I am doing this for you. You don't know her. She is manipulative. She is trying to ruin us." Julian did not look at her. He looked at his hands folded on the table. "Proceed, Autumn," he said softly. I did not open Lena's file. I did not even look at Aunt Margaret, who was pursing her lips, ready to unleash a triad of family anecdotes about how I once ruined a Thanksgiving by not smiling enough. I reached for the 3 thick folders I had prepared. I slid one to Julian. I slid one to my father. I slid one to Lena. The sound of the heavy paper sliding across the mahogany was the only noise in the room. "What is this?" Aunt Margaret asked, her voice sharp. "This is the ledger," I said. "Open it." Lena hesitated, but my father opened his. The first page was a summary sheet. "For the past 10 years," I began, my voice steady, "I have listened to a very specific story. The story is that Autumn is a mess. Autumn is broke. Autumn needs help. The story is that Lena is the success, the golden child, the one who holds the family together." I looked at my father. His eyes were scanning the page, wider and wider with every line. "The truth is," I said, "that the Schwartz family lifestyle has cost exactly $412,000 over the last decade, and every single cent of that came from the person sitting in this chair." "That is a lie," Lena shouted, standing up. "She forged this. Dad, don't look at it." "Sit down, Lena," my father whispered. His voice was shaking. "Dad?" she asked, panicked. "Page 3, my father said, his finger trembling on the paper. "The truck, the Ford F-150. I bought that 2 years ago. The dealership said there was a manufacturer's rebate program that covered the down payment, $8,000. He looked up at me. "That was you?" "I called the dealership manager," I said. "I paid the $8,000 over the phone and told him to call it a rebate. I didn't want you to feel like you couldn't provide for yourself." Aunt Margaret snatched the folder from the table. This is nonsense. Turn to page 10. Aunt Margaret, I said coldly. Uncle Jerry's nursing home fees. 6 months of private care before he passed. You told everyone the state covered it. The state denied your application. I paid the bills directly to the facility manager. $12,000. Margaret froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She dropped the folder as if it were burning her hands. The woman who had come here to testify to my selfishness was staring at the proof of my silent charity. No, Lena said, her voice rising in pitch. No, this is just numbers on a page. You type this up. Those are wire transfer confirmations, I said. They have transaction identification numbers. They are legal banking documents. And then there is you, Lena. I looked at my sister. She was shrinking. The red dress no longer looked like power. It looked like a desperate flag. Page 20, I said. The graphic design course you dropped out of. $4,000. The credit card debt you racked up networking in New York. $14,000. The down payment on your condo. $20,000. I looked at Julian. He was reading his copy of the folder. He was reading the history of the woman he loved, written in the ink of unpaid debts and silent bailouts. You told me you saved up for the condo, Julian said, his voice quiet, deadly. You told me you hustled for 2 years to buy that place. I did, Lena cried. I did work. Autumn just... She chipped in. That is what sisters do. She is twisting it. Chipped in? I asked. I paid the entire deposit. Lena, you told Mom and Dad you won a design competition. You told Julian you were a self-made woman. But the only thing you have ever made yourself is a narrative. Why did you do it then? Lena screamed, slamming her hands on the table. If you hate us so much, why did you pay? You did it to control us. You did it so you could have this moment. You are a psychopath. I did it because I wanted to be part of the family, I said. I thought that if I made your lives easier, you would eventually have the space to see me. I thought if I removed the financial stress, you would stop being so angry, so judgmental. But I realized something this week. You weren't stressed because you were poor. You were mean because you liked it. I stood up. The money stops today, I said. The anonymous grants, the lucky rebates, the magical insurance payouts. It is all over. My father put his head in his hands. He was weeping, not loud, dramatic sobs, but the quiet, heaving cries of a man who realizes he has been living a lie. He had spent years pitying me, looking down on me, while driving a truck I paid for, living under a roof I fixed, eating food bought with my subsidies. I am sorry, he choked out. Autumn, my God, I am so sorry. Don't, Lena hissed at him. Don't apologize to her. She humiliated us. She saved us, my father roared, slamming his fist on the table. It was the first time in his life he had ever raised his voice at Lena. She saved us, and we treated her like garbage. Look at this, Lena. Look at the numbers. She has been carrying us on her back for 10 years, and you wouldn't even let her come to dinner. Lena recoiled. She looked at Julian. Julian, she whimpered, please, you understand, right? I was embarrassed. I didn't want to look weak in front of you. Julian closed the folder. He stood up slowly. He looked at Lena, and the expression on his face was not anger, it was exhaustion. It was the look of a man who has just realized he has been dating a stranger. You lied about your career, Julian listed. You lied about your finances. You lied about your sister. You lied to my face, repeatedly, for months. I did it for love, Lena argued. No, Julian said. You did it for status. There is a difference. He turned to me. Autumn, I apologize for the disruption. You have my full confidence. Saint, Jude's is honored to work with you. Thank you, Julian, I said. I am leaving now, Julian said to the room. Lena, do not contact me. I will have my assistant send over a box with your things. Julian, Lena screamed, lunging for his arm. He stepped back, avoiding her touch with a look of distaste. He walked out of the room without looking back. Lena stood there, trembling. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "Are you happy?" she spat. "You won. You are rich. You are right. And now you are alone. No one wants you. Autumn, you can't buy love." "I am not trying to buy it anymore, Lena," I said calmly. "That is the point. I stopped buying it 5 days ago, and look at what happened. You all showed up." I looked at Aunt Margaret, who was staring at the table, unable to meet my eyes. I looked at my father, who was broken. I looked at Lena, who was still trying to find a weapon in an empty room. "Here are the new terms," I said. "I am the CEO of Northline. I am your daughter, your niece, and your sister. I am not your ATM. I am not your punching bag. If you want to see me, you call my assistant and book a lunch. If you talk about me behind my back, I will know, and I will disappear again, and next time, I won't come back." "We can fix this," my father pleaded. "Autumn, please." "You can try," I said. "But you are going to have to do it without the checkbook. You are going to have to love me for free, and I honestly don't know if you can afford that." I pressed the button on the intercom. "Elena," I said, "please show my guests out." I did not watch them leave. I sat down and opened the quarterly report for the 3rd quarter. I picked up my pen. The room was quiet. It was a real silence this time. It wasn't the silence of secrets kept or words swallowed. It was the silence of a clean slate. I had not taken revenge. Revenge is petty. Revenge is emotional. I had simply forced them to look in the mirror, and if they did not like what they saw, that was no longer my problem. I was free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let me know your location and your thoughts on Autumn's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and give this video a hype so it can reach more people who need to hear it.